Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Manufacturing Transformed. Today, I got to sit down with Jeff Justesen from Oakdale Precision in Minnesota, and boy, was it a satisfying conversation. This is quite an amazing company with about 100 CNC machines. Well, some of them are fab machines, but 100 pieces of equipment, about 65 people in 3 buildings doing just a huge volume of work. And they moved from their homegrown ERP to Pro Shop about 3.5 years ago. And to say it has been a transformation is definitely not an understatement. They have seen lead times cut almost in half, although the lead times he's quoting are very short. So amazing, from 4.2 weeks down to 2.7 weeks, I believe he said, average lead time through the shop. He enumerates a bunch of reasons how this has happened. They got AS9100 certified in the last year. Jeff clearly takes great pride in this business that his father and a couple of business partners started. He started when he was 14, or at least helping out a little bit in the shop, and remembers them even pouring the concrete floors in their new building. So a lot of history here. This is a guy that knows his stuff, knows the industry, and seen such an improvement with Pro Shop. So it's, again, super gratifying to be able to hear these stories, know the impact that we have made or helped them make on their business with our software and our team. So without further ado, let's get into it with Jeff. Jeff, welcome to Manufacturing Transformed. Glad to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me.
That's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to chatting. So let's start by sharing a little bit about your background, the company, Oakdale Precision, and just a snapshot of what the company looks like today, what you specialize in, and a little bit of the history of the shop as well.
Yeah, definitely. So we were founded in 1996. We had 700 square feet. I was 14 back then. My dad was coming to work at 3M, and then he was also coming to his shop to get his work done after his normal job. So he had 2 business partners at that time. And for me, I just wanted to do whatever my dad was doing. So back then, we had a cart full of aluminum C-channel, and he was just drilling a couple holes in those. Mm-hmm. And so I would hand him the aluminum bar. He would drill holes in it. He would then hand it to me. I'd put it on a cart, and then I'd go back around and give him another one. So he started off with a manual lathe, a Bridgeport, and then what they called a CNC, but it was pretty much an easy track.
Okay. Yep.
From the late 70s. So it was a pretty funny looking computer hanging off the side there. So yeah, just 3 machines and 700 square feet. And then about 6 months later, they knew they needed more space. And so this building here that we're still in was just being built. So they had rented 4,000 square feet here. And my first memory of this place was walking through the rebar in the floor before they had actually poured the concrete.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it goes back quite a ways. For me personally, I started full-time in 2006. And so I was working kind of off and on through high school and college, and then started up full-time just about 20 years ago.
Super cool. And tell us about what does the company look like today?
Yeah, definitely. So from that original 4,000 square foot, we end up taking over the 2 bays next to us by about 2000. And somewhere around 2004, they end up taking over the entire building. So we have about 18,000 square foot in this main building. We also have 2 other locations that are nearby. Mm-hmm. We got a sheet metal shop that has their own building, and then we have a Swiss production shop that has their own building. So I think altogether, somewhere around 60,000, give or take, square feet.
Okay. That is good diversification.
Yeah.
And capabilities and facilities. And tell us a little bit about the industries that you kind of specialize in serving.
Yeah, definitely. So some of our services here, we have a full service sheet metal shop. So they'll do laser, form, welding, obviously installing hardware, do a lot of assembly work over there. There's a lot of engineering that also goes on up front. Now, we don't offer engineering, but as we all know, some of the models that we get aren't perfect. So a lot of work going up front. So it's a full service sheet metal fab shop. And then here at our main building, we have tool grinding. We have 4 or 5 rows of vertical machining centers, a couple of horizontals, and then we have 7 lathes with live tooling, Y-axis, stuff like that.
Okay.
And then in our other building is a Swiss production facility. And that's a fully automated shop that offers contactless manufacturing. So if you have critical surfaces or features, it's automated with robots. So everything kind of gets picked and packed as you manufacture it. They had a really cool parts washer. For me, growing up, you could get work and you could make parts, but what do you do with them after that? And so we always dreamt of this way of handling parts after they get machined, because we would take them out of buckets and you'd put them into trays and you'd wash them one at a time. And so now everything is automated. So all of our parts go into some trays that we built in-house, and they get brought over to a conveyor. They go through a ultrasonic and immersion, and then they have some cooling coils that actually, the parts get heated up, and then all the chemicals kind of attach to those cooling coils. So the parts come off clean and dry, perfectly chip free. And so that's a pretty cool building over there. That's a state-of-the-art facility, and they have all their air handling. So even if we are running, all 22 machines, the air inside is still better than the air outside. So it's a good environment to work in.
Wow. 22 Swiss. So how many total pieces of equipment do you say you have?
Oh gosh. Well,
can you count that high? It sounds like a lot.
Yeah, I think we're somewhere around 100 pieces of equipment that we have a name tag on, and we have maintenance reports and stuff like that for. So.
Wow. And what industries do you specialize in? Do you serve medical or commercial, aerospace, defense? What?
Yeah, definitely. So we get into aerospace. We have medical. 3M's right next door, so we get kind of whatever they're playing with.
Okay.
So yeah, we get into a decent spread of stuff that way. We do get into some commercial components as well. There's a lot going on with computing these days, and a lot of parts that they need between their cooling systems and their mainframes. So we also play around with that. We have the ability to do prototype. That's really what our core competency is for a lot of years. And so folks can come in, get their first few parts made, whether it's Swiss or mill or sheet metal. And then we have the capacity to take that into, for sure, low to medium-sized runs. And in the Swiss, of course, the more the merrier over there. So,
Yeah. Very neat. And you're ISO and AS9100 certified, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Awesome. Perfect. So tell us a little bit about what challenges were you facing? What was going on in the shop when you decided you needed some different software to help organize everything?
Yeah, that's a fun one. So the way you start off is you walk in the door for the first time and you start cutting parts. Somebody brings over a part and it's just a few folks working. Then you realize you need a notepad. So you start actually recording on a notepad what you're going to do for the day. And then as things progress, we had started with our own software. So it was a glorified spreadsheet. And from there, it actually got to be a fairly capable software. We went through a few iterations of it. And so we got to the point where it was very functional. Now, it didn't have scheduling, and it didn't have any quality built into it. It didn't have procedures built into it. And so we kind of were able to manage the shop, if you will. But we weren't really able to add notes that weren't scanned in on old prints, or if the same person didn't get the same parts. And even if you don't experience a lot of turnover as a shop grows, you're bringing new people in. And it was challenging for that tribal knowledge to get to where it needed to be in order to make sure that we were making the same parts. We did a lot of critical components for machines that analyze blood. So if you get into the H1N1 back in the day, obviously COVID as of late. And so those parts are tricky. And there's a few folks that know how to make them very well, but they were unable to get their work order and understand exactly what they needed to do. And so between needing to schedule, needing to communicate to other parts of the company, and we need a sheet metal part, we need a lathe part, change quantities, maybe you need to put something on hold. All these kind of things started coming up, and it was real challenging for us to onboard new folks and to make sure our customers were getting the same parts without a lot of extra effort. And so as we continued to grow and get into situations where you went from, you're working with just individual people, engineers, if you will, and then you start working with purchasers, and they have a different perspective on things.
They do.
They may need to change their quantities or change their rev or add more parts, or And it's really hard to do that with the paper travelers. And so what happens is customer calls up, you say, okay, I'm going to run out to the shop. I'm going to get that work order. I'm going to make that change. The trouble is by the time you get to that work order, if you're able to find it, you've talked to 3 or 4 people who maybe need 3 or 4 or 10 different things. And you've kind of forgot why you went out in the shop in the first place. And so if you multiply that by 4 or 5 people writing up jobs, hundreds of different customers that can call up at any time, it was really challenging to manage the workload that we had. So we would see WIP would balloon up when projects would get on hold. We'd see old revs get manufactured because that correction didn't make it out to the floor in time. And so it was challenging to continue with our old system. And the other thing is, because we had built it, we had the ability to constantly change it. And so as your company grows, we could take the quality department, for instance. They need to be able to manage their NCRs, and they need to be able to manage, things that pertain to them specifically. And so they get a hold of the fellow that had built their software, and which was an engineer in-house, very diligent worker, and he would create this solution for them. Trouble is, we weren't aware of that solution that was created. And so without the intent, you found that the company kind of started to spread apart a little bit. And everybody kind of had their own little island that they would stay focused on. And there was no real ability to bring that back together again. And so I just saw the company spreading wider and wider, taking more and more communication. The cracks were getting bigger, and it was just challenging all around. And so we're 30 years in, just about, into manufacturing, and you start to get changeover at the top potentially, and it's really hard to take a company that is so organically built with a lot of your core folks that have been there for 20 plus years. It's hard to train into that. It's hard to bring new people in, and that software just simply wasn't on the floor. It wasn't face forward. It was a reactionary culture. We always reacted to what was set down on our desk. And so we just kind of felt like there was a little bit of a glass ceiling. And the trouble was, we didn't know the markets we were going to be getting into. And so we didn't know if our software was going to continue to stand up to what we were going to see. And so a nod to you, Paul, and to the team for you guys having a shop forward software that gave us a lot of confidence, saying, hey, this thing's been out there. It's been beat up a few times. They have came back and made these reiterations to it so that it's very applicable. And so, it was really just the fact that we felt like we were constrained. We didn't know what we didn't know. And we were sick of saying, well, let's change the software and then we'll be able to fix this next time. Well, unfortunately, the customer now has exposure to that problem. And so that was something we felt we needed to change.
Wow. That's quite a story. Yeah, we've helped a number of companies come from a custom solution, and the way you describe the development of it is interesting, and I'm sure quite universal. And on one hand, it's great to be able to make it do exactly what you want for your own specific company, but that comes with its own challenges at the same time. So when did you make that decision? When did you decide to start looking, and why did you choose Pro Shop ultimately over other options out there?
Yeah, so this is kind of a fun one. It's challenging to nail down exactly. You kind of wake up a lot of days, usually in a row, saying something has to change. And so you do the same thing you did the day before. You go after the software you have. You go bug the engineer that's developed it. And pretty soon it came to the point of scheduling. And I said, listen, we had an opportunity at a large production opportunity requiring 100 part numbers, multiple different quantities. And I said, I need to schedule this. And we worked pretty hard to develop our own scheduling, and it kind of fell through. And so it was about 4.5 years ago. We've been with Pro Shop 3.5 years now. And so it was about a year that I took to really vet out different softwares. Paul, I commend your team for dealing with me early on. I was trying to stay positive, but I was nosy. I wanted to know everything. And
as you should.
Yeah. And so I did put your team through quite a few questions. At one point, I think Brian said, listen, here's the keys. You can drive this thing for a while. And I'm not advertising that that's what you offer for onboarding customers, but I think it was the only way to survive for some of your folks. And so I got in and I played around quite a bit, saw how everything was connected. And I also, at that time, met the team. I met the folks that cared, and they would jump on at any time. There was energy there. There was a lot of softwares out there. I felt like they were kind of in their form for quite a while. They had maybe made a lot of progress in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, but they were kind of held to their form. I got a lot of big offices. I got a lot of pre-canned answers. It just felt like it's not that they were dead. It's not that they weren't good softwares, but I knew full well that if you look back, Paul, in the last 5 years, how have things changed? I mean, AI is cooked into a lot of stuff now. The way companies are expected to use data to get feedback. Your software generates data at all the right places. It's accessible. You can use it. And you have a team that's incredibly responsive. And I'm not paid to say this, and it's just really refreshing because your real challenges in manufacturing should come from your customers. So yeah, Pro Shop was just a very alive kind of feel to me. It seemed like you were, although had been going for a while, you were just getting started and you were taking feedback and you were actually cooking that into your software. Not saying we don't do that or we don't do this. I heard the phrase, it's amazing what you can do and it's amazing what you can't. And there's a very constructive undertone to that. A lot of things that maybe you can't do, you could pursue it, but there's actually an answer that's already out there for it. And so I use that as more of a guiding system for me in this software, and realized everything you need is actually sitting in front of you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I have a similar saying that I like, you can do anything, you just can't do everything. Right. And we, thank you for all the kind words about the team. They really are an incredible group of people that have so much passion for it. But yeah, staying very focused on what we're good at and not diversifying into food and beverage or whatever this distribution. Like, we are about precision manufacturing, right? And contract manufacturing, and don't want to deviate from that. So. Well, I'm glad it all resonated and you ended up joining with us. So that was about 3.5 years ago now. But beyond your custom software, you must have been scheduling some way. Were you scheduling on whiteboards, and what other spreadsheets or systems that you were using to just run the business? Have you consolidated a bunch of different things?
Yeah, it got pretty wily at one point. There's a lot of different drives, if you will. So if you wanted to know what inspection was working on, you go to the I drive, and then you would find stuff in there, assuming people did what they were supposed to do in there. And then you would have an S drive that different machinists would make for their folders. We had a spreadsheet for quoting. We end up cooking that into our software, but that was just a big fancy calculator. Yeah, the whiteboard. I think everybody has a whiteboard story because we developed our work orders or our routers. We had a little cutout right in the bottom. And you'd cut that out and you'd put it into a magnet, and then you would put that on a whiteboard. And then pretty soon you'd look at this whiteboard and it was like, wow, it's really impressive. But that was your scheduling. And so you'd have all the work that wasn't scheduled, and then you'd put stuff up into different machining centers, and it worked. It was fine. But there wasn't a lot of visibility with it. Somebody ordered material, they'd put all the work orders in back for that material to come in, and then folks could see what was maybe next up. So yeah, our scheduling was around the whiteboards. Some of the spreadsheets we used were cooked into our software finally at the end there. And then we used a lot of different drives, just I drive, Z drive, S drive. Oh gosh, I'm probably forgetting 10 or 15 of them, but there was a lot of drives to go to places to get information.
So on those drives, I imagine you just had folder structures that were where people would store G code or drawings or setup sheets or things, and it was just up to the people to maintain the structure and make sure they were putting things in the right spot. And maybe you had some permissions with Windows of like who could edit or who could, write access or whatever, but still very much a human generated structure.
Yeah. Yep. It's just kind of a dump where people would go and save all their old programs for the folks out on the floor so they could always reference, what so-and-so did last time.
Right.
And so you had a place to go to get those programs. You had a place to go to get prints, assuming they were saved, but there wasn't structure to it. It was somebody's name. And so again, it was really based on tribal knowledge. It works as long as everybody knows what everybody else knows and things like that. So rev controls were challenging. A lot of that had to come from the paper routers and stuff like that. Yeah, it was just a lot of kind of random drives that we made work, but the structure, unfortunately, wasn't really there.
Yeah. I mean, probably every company out there has stuff stored on drives, and many of them, I like your iDrive for inspection. That's creative use of the letters. But yeah, it can become overwhelming, and things can mysteriously disappear, and then you're stuck needing something you don't have.
Mm-hmm. Real quick, Paul, the other thing about populating a drive is a lot of times you're scanning documents. And so you're scanning them into a holding area, and then somebody's analyzing this, and then they have to rename it. And so human error starts to come in as well with these drives. So even with the greatest of intentions, the humans tend to make a mistake from time to time.
Yeah, of course. So once you onboarded, and let's just talk a little bit about the onboarding. So I'm not sure who you had. Do you remember who?
Oh, yeah.
Luke. Oh,
still bug him to this day. So.
Used to. Yeah, he's such a good guy. And there's few people that could probably take on as big and complicated a company as yours there. And how many? You said about 100 machines. How many folks do you have?
So right now we're sitting at 65 employees.
Okay. All right. That's a nice employee to machine ratio. I imagine that's kind of heavy on the machines because that the Swiss area with whatever you said, 20 plus machines is fairly lightly staffed, just a lot of automation.
Even with quality over there, we're at eight people over there.
Wow. It's an impressive ratio. Very cool. Very cool. So you met with Luke probably twice a week or more. That was kind of the typical cadence. Was it mostly you and some key team members that got trained, or how did that process go, and then disseminating it out to the rest of the company?
Yeah, definitely. So we had just our management team in there. So pretty much folks in the office, and then we had the folks from shipping. And shipping is kind of a broadly used word. They really take care of everything that didn't get done in the machine. So a lot of times they're making sure requirements are in, or they're getting things out to expediting. It's a very integral part of our company. Some of our most experienced folks are actually in what you would say is, shipping.
Right. It's really logistics and all sorts of critical things.
So we had about 12 people in our training sessions.
Oh, cool. Okay. And what was your process for going live? Did you do a big bang thing? Did you start phasing in new jobs, run parallel for a while?
Yeah, definitely. So we were conflicted with whether or not we start just new orders that come in the building. Do we wind down current work orders and kind of run two systems? Do we try to import the current work orders where they're at and then see them through? I mean, the reality of software is no matter how elegant it is, it's still new screens. It's still the first time you're seeing something. And so what we thought was it would be the least impact to our customers if we continue our old work orders in our old system and then start onboarding new work orders in the new system as those folks were trained in, as those folks that were taking in those orders, as they were working with their customers, as they got a good foundation underneath them, then they would start to put their work orders in. Now, you do get to a point where half your work's in one and half your work's in the other. So there gets to be a little more immediacy to getting more and more work orders. And so I think at a certain point, we gave it about a year to let people do as they see fit. And then after about a year, it was like, okay, everything after July 1st is going to be in the new system. So that forced us to clean up some cobwebs with some folks and help them get to a good functional standpoint. It wasn't that it was real challenging to do, but again, manufacturing is dynamic. And so to just say, hey, you've been doing it this way for 20 years in the software that you built and designed and are very comfortable with, now you have to do the same challenging parts, only you're going to do it in a whole new software system. Generationally speaking, obviously the folks that are maybe a couple generations above us or one above us takes a little bit more time, a little bit more patience. And so, but yeah, we did get to a point where we said, okay, from here forward, everything goes in. I was the champion for our team. And so I would help write up assemblies. I'd help work with the sheet metal folks. I would really just kind of step in to bridge some of those gaps. And then I would walk them through the shop and answer questions as, the laser got it, the press brake got it, or something went from lathe to mill, just kind of helping folks out. The folks on the floor onboarded pretty quickly with basic to function. This is my schedule. This is what I'm working on. How do I punch in, punch out, all that stuff. They got that within a matter of a day or two. But some of your deeper operation components and how to use part check info, we're still working with that today as certain parts need it and things like that. So yeah, we kind of had a hard stop there and after about a year.
And so you've been live for 3.5 years or 2.5 years?
3.5 years, yep.
Okay, very good. I love it. Mm-hmm. When you first started that, I don't know if you had any metrics or anecdotes about sort of how long things would take when you got a new order in and before it was like ready for the shop floor with everything, digitally ready, maybe material here and everything else. And has that changed? So maybe just describe a little bit about how your office workflow and lead times might have changed.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good one. So we have a couple of customers. And for me, I've been in my current position for about 13 years. I manage all the turning work that comes through the company. And I had certain customers that I thought they always needed 2 weeks. That's just what I was used to seeing. By the time that work order got to my desk, paper form, I had 2 weeks to get it cut. One thing that Pro Shop opened my eyes to once we were able to process orders quicker, I realized we actually had 5 weeks. It was just time that never existed because a lot of this work is challenging. You have to really plan it out, and you only have so many tools in the old software to do that. So by the time they would actually get it all ready, pull up all the old scanned prints, get that stuff in, analyze the job, see if they needed tools. So one thing Pro Shop did is it just found time between the order actually hitting our inbox and the work orders being ready. The other thing I did last year, just out of curiosity, is I ran a query to see what was our average time from a work order being created to a work order being shipped. And in 2022, it was 4.3 weeks. In 23, it was 3.6. And in 2024, it's 2.7 weeks. So between the visibility of work orders and orders that have come in to our ability to simply process things quicker through the shop using the tools that are available, really going to push on operation components for this one. The ability to plan, whatever it is, maybe the wind's blowing a little different these days. I don't know, but yeah, we cut our lead time not quite in half, but we also gained that time between the order entry and having work orders that we can get going on.
Wow, that's quite an improvement. With your old system, would you print off the customer PO when it came in, and then would physical, job travelers be created and then moved between people's desks to do things like planning or ordering material, or was that part of your process? And do you think having parallel processing in a digital way now, is that partly what cuts out so much of that time?
I do think that. So we started really focusing on what's our customer experience from the time they ask for a quote to the time this work order gets out in the shop. That's not where the journey ends, but you got to break it down and dial some things in. So we work on our quoting first, and then we're able to enter orders. So we're changing estimates into parts. We're getting our parts and files, prints and files in, and then our planners are able to take over, create op components, do their planning, do things like that. So yes, parallel processing absolutely saves time. The way it used to work is you would send out a quote, you get that email back, you'd go to your stack of quotes that you just sent out recently. If it's a quote from a few months ago, you got to go, into your file cabinet and find that. So once you find it, then you would go into our software. You would say, yes, they ordered all these parts. Then you would create those routers. Then you would print them all off. So the printer would kick all those out. Then you would go kick out all new prints in case there was any rev changes. And then you cut off all your tags, because don't forget, we got to populate that magnet board. And then you would fold them all up and then you would put it into different stacks based on what material you were ordering. Was it metal? Was it plastic? Where was the material coming from? Then you would go through and confirm that the sizes and quantities of material, and then you would purchase that material. That stack would get clipped together. All the plastic would go to the back. If it was metal, it would go to one of a few different suppliers. Those would all get clipped together. Those would go to the back. Now, I would get the magnets and I could put them up, but I didn't know what they were unless I actually went into the system and started parsing through all these different jobs. So then I would start to schedule the magnets. And then I would get the prints once the material came in. So it was quite a ways down the road before I actually had something to hold in my hand that said, hey, this is actually what you're making. Otherwise, you're just looking at a part number on a little magnet. So yeah, it's vastly different, and parallel processing is absolutely what's attributed us to finding that time between order acceptance and work orders being ready.
So of that, whatever you said, 4.2 to 2.7, how much of that was in the office period of time versus how much was in the shop, would you say?
That was challenging. Once I saw those numbers, it just kind of gave me a little positive wind in the sail. I think just being live and in the moment really helped out. I think knowing what we needed to do, I think people being able to look ahead, having a schedule, Paul, which why would you have a manufacturing software without one? Having a schedule is incredible, especially as you get more dynamic. So I think simply being able to schedule things, do your run togethers, similar parts, looking up who ran it last, having their program saved, right there in the part folder. There's a lot of things that attribute to it. Kind of a lot of little streams ended up to be a pretty big river.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that sounds like a big win in the office. And then out on the shop floor, you already talked about the challenge of trying to go find a traveler and maybe forgetting why you even went out to the shop in the first place. But maybe just allude to some of the improvements or changes that happened on the shop floor.
Wow. So where do you begin there? Visibility. Simply knowing what's expected of you is pretty impressive for folks. So again, for us, I spoke about scheduling quite a bit. But that was a big one. Being able to look ahead, folks really like that. They can get into their programming ahead of time. They can mark off that they have their programming done to the pre-processing checklist. So I think that the benefit of having that schedule is big. Also, the operation components. So for folks that don't know what that is, you can put in anything that you want checked on the part. You can put in a full tool list. Paul, you've got to have some horror stories about what a tool list looks like. Old setup sheets, my gosh, they're terrible. People will put an end mill, they'll put a drill bit. Sometimes you'll get a size, sometimes you won't. And it's absolutely brutal. So the fact that, again, if you jump in with both feet, you're going to get after that tool module, get your tools set up. So I think the folks on the floor really like picking up parts that have already been done, as well as having that visibility into what's coming, even if it hasn't been done before. And then, of course, the ability to just move work between one machine and the other. Things happen quick. Customers call up all the time. Somebody from the office can make a change. They can add notes. They can put details in. The messaging system that you guys have is pretty cool. And so I think just the experience on the floor is that they're more connected with the people in the office. And then we use process development for pushing that feedback loop to a full circle. So we can plan all we want.
Nice.
But sometimes people that quote things aren't actually making them. And so they will say, hey, next time, let's rough this first, finish that, or we'll get this tool. So the ability to get feedback, I just think it really makes a complete circle. And I think we're really starting to benefit from that.
Can you just speak a little bit more about that communication between the shop and the office and back and forth? Because I've definitely heard the anecdotes that a lot of times there's kind of a divide in a shop. It's like the office people and the shop people, and sometimes it's not even that harmonious. And like, oh, those guys don't know anything about what we do, or they're not. There's no mechanism to give feedback about, hey, this ran really hard, or this we had to do this thing, or we had to change this fixture, and that giving all the machinists and the shop floor folks sort of a voice and a mechanism to really share their experience, which I think is foundationally important, because they are the ones that know all day, every day what they're doing and how they're doing it and ways to improve it. And yeah, does it feel more collaborative? Is it improved, the culture between the two groups of folks, or just anything in that realm?
Yeah, definitely. That's a big one, Paul. There's nothing worse when you don't feel like you're all building the same ship, if you will. Um, I was always kind of envious, and I've used that analogy a fair amount, but at least when you're building a ship, you can usually see the folks building the front, you're building the middle, they're building the back, what have you. We're all in the same shipyard. In manufacturing, it's quite different. You don't get to see the work that other people are doing. And so it's hard to know. And so without having that connection from the shop to the office, or the shop to the quality, or any one of those pieces, without having that kind of union, you're missing out on a lot. That's where you get your victories from in manufacturing, is getting more efficient, more effective. And the most valuable information you can get is from the floor. I hold them on high, especially feedback from shipping, when they can put in quotes, they can put in lead time dates, they can push and pull stuff around like crazy. So yes, using process development is huge. Using the messaging system, using the tool module to say what tools you need. There's a host of ways to get information. It's all categorized. It has a great structure to it. So it's not just this shotgun blast. A lot of times people would come into your office and tell you everything they didn't like, and don't forget that this for next time. It's challenging to do. If you don't have a place to go with that information, there's a good chance you may forget it if that part shows up 6 months ago, depending upon how bad the burn was from the mistake or something like that. So, yeah, absolutely. Pro Shop has a great way for that feedback loop to actually function. And I think that's definitely led us to be the company we are today, and is going to be integral in making us the company we want to be in the future.
That's awesome. Yeah. Having that both accountability and feedback, and a spot for every piece. I always talk about machining being the hardest industry in the world, and there's a million details you got to get right every time for everything to, make a margin. Yeah. And I can feel it, the feedback dump of like this and this and this and this, it's just, what do you do with it? Like, let me interview and take a paragraph and try to, put that in a spot where I'm going to remember later to fix all the things next time we get the job again, versus some very well segmented spots that will even just flag you next time. It's like, hey, there's an improvement idea that we really should consider. Well, I'm glad for your team that's gotten better.
And I think too, another piece to keep in mind is, when problems come up, you have a situation to diffuse first. And so it puts a lot of pressure on managers to diffuse the situation, to get down to the actual pieces sometimes of what maybe didn't go right. And so it's not like everybody's walking around with these objective ideas of exactly what. You got to kind of chew through the minutia a little bit to get to what exactly went on. So the idea that you have a live system that completes a feedback loop, people are doing this in a more constructive environment. They're doing it a lot of times ahead of time. So just something to keep in mind, that I think some of the stresses that you get in manufacturing, or if you're responsible for managing a lot of it, is having an environment that's constructive for the feedback loop to work and stuff like that. So
that's a great point. When did you get your AS9100 certification?
We're just about have had it for a year now. So.
Oh, okay. Relatively recently. Yep. Okay. So it was all under Pro Shop.
All under Pro Shop. Yep.
Okay. Well, so maybe you didn't have a QMS formally for a certification prior, but you certainly were doing things like inspection and hopefully tracking quality. Was any of that built into your old system?
That's where the spreadsheets. So our QM at the time had certain software, and SPC software, where the data was kind of pulled out and then manually entered. So the dates would be entered and the ship dates would be compared, and so you'd have an incredible amount of manual data entry. That was a real challenging piece for us for a lot of the quality metrics, was that we were just simply not connected to them.
Okay. So maybe just talk a little bit, if you can, about how quality has changed. Now, you said you're still implementing part check and sort of built-in inspection, or is that fairly built into most of your part numbers now? Or
yeah, that's about 90% across the board. That's the real big win here. You can say manufacturing planning all you want, but at the end of the day, you're also quality planning. Your main goal is to make sure that your customer requirements are being met. If you stay focused on that, you're going to do just fine. And the nice part is, most of the time, it's on the PO or the print. And so all you have to do is pop open that PO, pop open those prints, see what those requirements are, and get those cooked into your part level. That's going to transfer into your work order. And so absolutely, we check a lot of parts right in the manufacturing process that they happen. We were, again, reactionary before. So for quality, it's through the lathe, it's through the mill, it's back from anodized, and let's go ahead and see if we got a good part. Now, it's not that folks weren't working hard throughout and doing the best they could. Sometimes you have first shift going into second shift. Sometimes you just have human error, you have mistakes. And so we were catching things, unfortunately, after parts are being manufactured a lot. And so now we're catching things right in the setup, or we're catching things right at the first manufacturing operation. And we also have a plan laid out. So if you need material, for instance, that needs to meet reach or rows, there's a fun one now. I see no Russian material a lot. So you got to kind of have these things in place when you get going versus reacting and saying, oh, wow, we made this out of material that maybe isn't going to assert to the standard it needs to. So for us, quality is happening in parallel. So you have order entry, and from there you kick off manufacturing and quality planning at the same time. So you have a work order, in theory, that's 100% ready to go, assuming those two processes were taken care of when they were supposed to be taken care of. The other cool thing is we're able to schedule our labs, and so they can see what part checks they have coming up. They can see if they have the equipment or not ready to do that. Maybe you got a funny thread or something. They can pop in, see if they got that quarter 36 thread that somebody came up with and decided they needed. Do we have the ability to check that thing? So it just gives them a window in instead of the door opening up on Friday and saying, oh, I need this first article done. Don't know if we got the stuff, but it's not due for another half hour, and they got 100 DIMs to get through and customer forms to fill out. So quality in that sense is absolutely alive and well, always growing, always getting better in that front, but it's a relentless pursuit. Pro Shop's definitely got the pieces in place to allow us to travel that journey with confidence.
So the shift between doing your formal inspection after it's back from anodize and doing it as you're in parallel with manufacturing planning, was that as you implemented Pro Shop and maybe saw it on the pre-processing checklist, like this is the best practice we suggest? Mm-hmm. Did you decide to adopt that because it was in the software?
I think it was a function that we always wanted. Whether you're able to actually carve that out and acknowledge that part check should be happening. Again, you have to realize the growth that we've gone through, in the 30 years, but just in the last 10 years alone, not to mention the last 5, you have a lot of your core group is still doing what they've always done. They're always putting out good parts, but they need to be able to work and lean on their teammates. When you have a plan that's in place that says, hey, check these few DIMs before you send that off to the mill, or check these few holes at the laser before you go get them, through the press brake and stuff like that. It just is a functionality that you should have. It sounds like a pain in the butt. It does take a little extra time, but it's the old adage, an ounce of prevention is, saves you a pound of pain. And in manufacturing, that's about 100 pounds of pain. When you got bad parts that, people are working overtime, staying late, hammering out weekends on, and somebody missed a hole that they should have checked earlier on. So, part check info is huge. The PP checklist, we use that exclusively. And, it's not really exclusive anymore. It's used pretty much across the board, especially in our Swiss and our turning and mill departments. They're getting a heck of a lot better at it. For us, when we program parts, we don't want to pull them because we think it'll be quicker to get them into another machine. So we use a pre-processing checklist for a lot of things. Of course, the first thing you do when you get a new software is you dump everything and you try to make it look like your old software. And the PP checklist was one that the first thing we did was say, well, we're not going to use that, right? And then you butcher it. You turn it into something where you click one button and the whole thing's green. We've learned there's a reason for the colors. The way it plays into the schedule is phenomenal. PP checklist. We don't use that one specifically for quality. We use it for some other things, but that's a good tool as well.
Very cool. Well, some people allude to Pro Shop as sort of an operating system, and it sure sounds like it's behaved in that way for you guys to some degree, helping structure kind of best practices and things that maybe you aspired to do all the way along. But like you said, and you haven't actually talked about how much growth you've seen in the last 5 years, but it sounds like it's been a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just helping scaffold the way you really want to run your business to minimize mistakes or reduce scrap or reduce lead time or whatever.
Yeah, the process control that you guys put in, having the quality management system actually in the same software that you're using kind of for your ERP is incredible. I actually went through most of my question and answers, not even getting into the quality stuff, just because the way I grew up, they were just two separate systems. So once we got the Flying Start package and that was pretty cool. You got to do some work there. Don't think that's a ticket to ride, but it's there and it's ready to go for you. The fact that you have training, you have tasks, these QPs, all right there, and you can click on this stuff. So somebody when comes in and says, "Hey, I'm going to work in shipping and I need to know how to get something out." Oh, okay. Well, click on your name, go through your 6 or 7 little trainings. They go right to tasks. Some cute little videos that you guys did that for a while. In an hour or so, they're ready to get after it. So that's a really important piece that you guys have that cooked in as well. So that's part of the framework that I'm very valuable, especially when you get into these audit scenarios.
Sure.
We didn't get too much into, but I'll be honest, we pulled off the AS 9100 in 3 months. And the auditors were I don't know if I'm supposed to say this or not, but they were supposed to be here for 3 days. And after a day, they showed up the next day just to give us results. But the fact that we were able to fly through everything from our QPs being dialed into an NCR, from bad parts, RMAs, where they went, they love that stuff. And the fact that we didn't have to get up and go all over for every question, pretty cool thing you got there.
That's awesome. That was actually the next question on the list, auditors. So yeah, hopefully suitably blown away. But similarly, customers, I imagine they come and visit and do their own quality audits, or just buyers come or whatever. Mm-hmm. How has some of that gone? How has that turned into a tool for you to connect with and share with your customers?
Well, in the beginning, you find out what you don't know. You think you have everything. I had been through the software. I had it all nailed down, but you don't really get the flow of it until you're asked a few questions. I think a good way to learn something is to try to teach it. And so when customers would come in, it would take me a little bit. Okay, here's everything we checked on the part. Here's your orders, and here's how we manage material. And now when they come in, I bring them out in the shop to show them. Now I can do stuff on video call. I can show them exactly what dimensions. They can call me up and say, "Hey, could you check this one every part? And we don't care about that one." And so you have to realize that the ability to just simply share a screen, you got that little graphic for your IPCs, shows you a little squiggly line. Yep. That's pretty cool. It's a simple little graphic, but hey, we're running high, we're running low, we're stable here. We don't need to check this one anymore. So customers love to see exactly how their parts are managed. And this is critical stuff. We're known for custom critical components. People want to know. So as friendly as it is and as nice as we all are, at the end of the day, they need good parts. And so the fact that I can get past that part of the conversation pretty quick allows us to focus on capacity, potential for more work, and really show them what we're good at. I can show you stuff we're not, and it shows up in the data. So it gives us a little light on our path as well. But customers, that's a slam dunk. You didn't ask me this one, but hiring folks, when you talk about bringing somebody into your company and you say, "Hey, here's our on-time delivery. Here's a tool list that you can actually read. Here's where the tools are. Here's a schedule. Here's your training that you're going to have to go through." You have to realize it's a huge tool for bringing folks in, because unfortunately, there is a lot of shops that are struggling with making that change from leaning heavily on that tribal information, heavily on those old scanned in prints. And people kind of get burnt out. If you mess up parts one time, it's one thing, but it's another if it happens 3, 4, or 5 times in a row and people are putting a lot of effort into this stuff. So what I see when I'm hiring people is I show them the system. I show them exactly what they're going to know. And the fact that they can get feedback from the floor, that they have a schedule, they have a way to process development, give those notes, see exactly what they're checking. It just makes it more doable. It's kind of a breath of fresh air, that you have a place to go with those informations, and you have a place to really capture that day-to-day stuff that is really what I will say is one of the most valuable things you can do.
Do you feel like you've had employees that may not have said yes to a job offer previously, but they see what they're going to walk into and they're like, yeah, I want to come work here?
Yeah, I've had a couple slam dunks, and I try to hide the swagger, but I'm a proud fellow when it comes to this thing because it works, and I know the pain. I grew up out in the shop. Like I said, it's I grew up around here, so I know what happens out there. I spent a lot of my life out there, and so yeah, when I can say again, you got a schedule, you got a tool list. When you're putting in notes, this is where they go. You can leave, shift tie-in's a pretty cool thing. We use that in a lot of places. We managed, we had 8 folks and we ran almost 4 shifts off of one just based on the information people would put in places. And so the proof's just in the pudding that the functionality's there, and anybody that actually cut their teeth out in the shop, they can see that pretty quick when they look at Pro Shop.
Right. You mentioned 4 shifts off of one. Do you mean you used to run 1 shift and now you run 4?
No, we are lights out manufacturing for most of that. So we'll have some folks come in on first shift. They might have to load some material, so they will come in on a Saturday or a Sunday just to do bar feeders, part checks, things like that. But second and third shift they weren't staffed. And so when they were, or if somebody was coming in to load material, they might have 10 or 12 machines to get to. They could pick up on whatever those dimensions were and be able to pick up right where the last person left off. So we were able to actually run the facility for almost 4 shifts, just staffing it on one.
Wow, that is really cool. I guess that makes sense that, with 100 machines and 65 people, it's like we had, when we sold our shop, we had about 75 people, but we had 30 something machines. Mm-hmm. So you have 3 times as many machines as we had with less people. Yeah. Just incredible. I think I have an idea of what you might say, but is there a feature you just could not live without Pro Shop anymore?
Well, the one I want to say, but I'm not going to say schedule. Yeah, I guess the whole thing's tied together, Paul. At the end of the day, there's no needs outside of it. There's accessory softwares. Obviously, you guys don't bubble prints. There's things that do that, but the experience, and again, we're 65 people. We're still growing into this thing. We're still realizing, hey, and we just had a customer today that said, you guys have been making these parts for 10 years. We now want you to check certain features. Well, that used to cause a big old uproar. Now you just throw a few things in part check info, in 5 minutes, you're ready to go. So, one thing I couldn't live without. I'm not sure I could manage this company without it. And I know for sure it'd be a challenge getting this thing into my generation and beyond, living off of tribal knowledge. People get old, they retire. Mm-hmm. And boy, I miss some of them dearly. But in fact, I was able to capture some of their work and some of their notes and some of their things, not on a coffee stained print, but actually in a format that's legible. Yeah, the whole thing, Paul.
All right. I'll take that one. So is your dad still working the business?
Yeah, 71 years old. He's still rocking 4 days a week.
I love it.
And, he's got a smile on his face, and I think the same old things still bug him, but, he still likes coming in. He likes it. I think he probably could have stepped away at different times, but, yeah, he's still coming in. So him and both his business partners are still working, definitely. So there's 3 owners total of the company, and yeah, they're all still coming in. Now I see some quotes coming in from different places. I don't know that they're always physically here, but they're able to access information, check on jobs, get a hold of me and tell me what to do and how to do it sometimes. But yeah, so he's still around. I've worked with him for pretty much my whole life. So.
That's cool. And do you have any kids that are coming up in the business behind you?
Well, I got 2 girls and a little boy. So I got a 12, an 11, and a 4.
So they're not quite ready to...
We're just getting into tree forts right now, Paul. So once I see how they handle tree forts and those kind of bill of materials there, we'll see if they're ready for manufacturing after that. So.
I love it. Well, didn't you say you started at 14? So
I did.
They might only be a year or so off doing something in the shop.
Yep. That was a lot of work back then. Yep, definitely.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So I imagine it's not made, you probably work just as many hours and it's just as, I mean, growing any business when you're in growth mode is just hard, right? So I'm sure you're working as hard as ever, but yeah, can you just describe any sort of personal impact that Pro Shop's had on you versus the way it used to be?
Yeah, well, it's given me one place to go. So no matter what situation that I come into, I can say, hey, this is how you handle that. And it's right in front of folks' face. They have a place to go constructively to take situations that come up and kind of get handled properly. You get real good at coming up with workarounds, and those may fix the situation in the moment, but it just means it's coming back to you. And so for me, I'm seeing less work put into fixing things or putting more Band-Aids on things. I'm finding more of my day is driving this company to expand fully into Pro Shop, be more customer focused specifically on requirements, understanding exactly how to schedule different resources, working on the culture, working on what part of the market we're going to penetrate next. For instance, right now we're just winding down a big project. It was about 15 years from prototype through. At a certain point, we were running about 60, 70,000 pieces a week. We're just wrapping that up. So we're in a position now where we're starting to talk to different customers about whole product lines to move over. It's hard to work on a whole product line when you might have 50 or 100 SKUs if you're still saying, hey, this is, don't forget to check this feature or that feature, So for me personally, it's allowed my time to go towards kind of the horizon, working on the company instead of the day-to-day dealing with some of the same old circles that would come back up in the old system.
Very good. Yeah. That's the old working on the business, not in it adage, right? It's just so critical to be able to move a company forward in a meaningful way when you're not just, paper cut it to death with a million little details all the time. I guess the last question here before we ask, people, ask you how people can get a hold of you. And you kind of already alluded to it. You said you maybe wouldn't want to run the shop without it anymore, but can you imagine in the last 3.5 years, what things would be looking like today if you had been able to even grow at the same pace with your old system? What would it be like? Would you have more people in various, overhead positions, expediting, planning, who knows what? Just, what would it look like today if you had not pulled the trigger on Pro Shop 3 years ago?
Well, the main thing is that we had a computer system throughout the company that was managed by a single person. And so that was weekends. They would have to come in, they'd have to update the computers. The software constantly needed maintenance. We also had to manage a lot of prints and files where only one person was kind of making sure that all these files were being moved around in one place. And so I didn't know how we were even going to function trying to manage that software and then manage these workflows that had incredible constraints in them. You might get a pile of prints and files, but if somebody's not there to move them, then we literally couldn't even get going in projects. So when I think about what the shop would look like, I think we'd have burnout in a lot of places. I think your hero's cape starts to get tattered at a certain point. I think that we would have more turnover. I think we'd have higher NCRs because when you have more volume, if you don't have good process, that reactionary culture and quality, that gets tiresome, gets expensive. So instead of feeling like we had this glass ceiling, we now feel like we have this horizon in front of us and a path to go. Are we perfect at it? Is everybody, is everything just perfect all the way around? Well, of course not. But we all collectively have the direction to go and we're doing it together. So I'm just excited about having a complete system, having that feedback loop, having that full circle. And again, staying focused on the business and kind of the green pastures ahead.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, thank you for your trust in us to be your partner to put all these improvements in place. It's fun for me to, sit here, look at you, see the smile on your face, hear the meaningful changes that have been made and know, I know what it's like to run a business like this and it's not easy. It's the hardest business in the world. I'll go to my grave saying it. So we can make it even a fraction easier. We've done our job. So, well, it sounds like you have lots of exciting horizons in the future. Wish you all the best. Thank you so much for sharing your journey here on the podcast today. And if people want to get a hold of you, work with an incredible company like yours, and maybe fill up that capacity that you just opened up recently, how would they go about getting a hold of you?
Yeah, just jump onto the website. OakdalePrecision.com is a good way. Otherwise, my email, I'm here every day, JJ at OakdalePrecision.com. And if I can't help you, I'll get you somebody that can. And we're always ready to go for whatever's next.
Awesome. Well, I hope at some point I can make it up to Minnesota and visit you guys. I would absolutely love to do that. Sounds like an amazing facility. I rarely hear about a company that's that diversified across Swiss and sheet metal and milling and turning. So I'm sure you can handle pretty much any project people have to throw at you. So yeah, thanks again for being on the show, and we'll see you around.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Appreciate the opportunity.
You bet.